And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Researchers Report. There's no Kerry tonight. He's in the chat, though. He's not feeling too good. I'm sure he's going to explain to everyone what's happened to him. Got a good show tonight. Stepping in for Kerry is, I believe you were here last night as well, Jason. You've kind of got yourself comfy here, you know.
Apparently.
Bigfoot Odyssey channel.
Yeah, there's a little cot. Yeah, there's a little cot over there. I'm hanging out.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. It's good to have you on. And our guest tonight, all the way from, just outside of Kansas City, it's Randy Harrington. Welcome, Randy.
Hello, it's good to be here. I appreciate you guys having me on. Hope we get to breach the subject tonight and cover some good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It's taken a while, actually, hasn't it? I think it's
been a minute
before I invited you on, and by the time we've got around to it, but we're here now. So you've been studying, you had an encounter back in 2006, but you've been looking into it before that, I think, had you? What started you off with Sasquatch?
Well, when I was a young boy, I was a voracious reader. I mean, I read all the time, and I would exhaust everything in my library at school. And in 7th grade, we actually had Roger Patterson's book, his book, Bigfoot of the Americas, Are They Real or whatever. And I read that. And when I first read that as a young boy, I wasn't deluded from other people's point of view or anything like that. It was just me reading the book, and it floored me. I could believe the way it was written. And basically the book was just full of reports from, the early 1900s and all the way up into the 1950s. And, all of these reports from the Pacific Northwest of this creature. And so as I'm reading this for the first time, in my mind, they're real. I hadn't seen one certainly at that point, but I'm reading this book about all of these people telling these stories, and there's just no way you could have convinced me that they weren't real. And that's where it started.
So where did you go from there? What was your, did you think you'll do some research? What was going on back then?
I then went to the public library in my town, and there's maybe 2 other books that I found there that I read those also. And they may have been a Sanderson book or, one of those gentlemen. I can't remember. I just know that I read whatever I could find, which wasn't very many, in my town. But then I got to fast forward to, I got on the fire department in 1997, and I'd never had a computer at home until I got on the fire department. And then we had a computer at home, because, all those for those reasons. And the moment I had a computer and was able to access, just punching something into your search engine, I mean, there was no looking back at that point, because you could find anything Bigfoot related that you wanted to.
Yes.
And that's where I went off the deep edge, looking into everything and anything. And that's how I ended up having my sighting. 2 other firefighters and myself went down to the Kiamichi Mountains and with 4-wheelers. And I'd never camped. I'd never been an outdoorsman, never camped, anything like that. But we all liked our 4-wheelers. And I was a secret Bigfoot reader, believer, and I read everything. Come to find out, they left it up to me to find a place for us to go rent a cabin and ride 4-wheelers around for a week. And I found the Kiamichi Mountains. There was a place called, I think, Silver Creek Cabins, and there was a gentleman there named Doug who would take you on a 60-mile loop through those mountains for like $50 a piece. And so that's what we did. And while we were on this trip, we came across a granite wall, and I've actually have it on my Facebook page. It's my profile picture at the top. I'm standing by this big granite rock where somebody had wrote in red letters, Bigfoot 2001. And this was in 2003. And I asked the guy, Doug, I said, what's that all about? Because we're out in the middle of the mountains, and somebody wrote on a rock, said Bigfoot. He said, well, somebody must have saw Bigfoot here. And that's when I kind of opened up that I was a Bigfoot enthusiast, believer, wannabe, and I asked him. I said, what do you think? I said, are they real? And he said, I haven't seen one myself. He said, but I have got a lot of friends that are in the logging industry, and when they tell me that they've seen one run across the front of their truck, he said, I have no reason to disbelieve them. Mm-hmm. So that little conversation I had right there, I knew I was where these things were at. And from that moment on, every time I would get, the fire department schedule allowed me 4 days off every 2 weeks, where I'd get day on, day off, 2 days on, day off. And then I'd have 4 days off. Every time I'd get to those 4 days off, I'd drive down there and I'd camp. I'd find places to go. I'd get back on the logging roads. For 2 years, I mean, every moment I got, I was going down there, and I was just playing the numbers game. I was like, I've got to be here if I ever want to see one. And I eventually did. So that was kind of how it started for me.
Just going back to when you started getting into the internet, like back then in the 90s, early 90s, I don't know if you found that, Jason, the internet was a lot kind of wilder back then. There was so much info out there, anything and everything. There seemed to be no kind of filters. Was the stuff about Bigfoot then that you read about that you're not hearing about now, say? Or did you find any sort of bits of information that you can't find now?
Are you asking Jason or me?
I'm asking you, Randy.
Actually, no, because I think the meat of the information that I got at that time was the BFRO. I think it was the beginnings of them starting their database, where you could go into each state and each county and every little province of area you could go into and find out how many people have seen them there. Well, come to find out, the place where we took our four-wheelers in 2003 in the Leflore County, Kiamichi Mountains of Oklahoma, has had more Bigfoot sightings than any county east of the Rockies. So I was in the spot in Oklahoma if you want to increase your chances of seeing one. So that's where I've been going back to, and I still go there. I go there all the time. I take people all the time. Me and Shane and another buddy were just down there, in October, and we had so many rocks thrown at us. I mean, we've got recordings of these huge rocks landing and hitting trees after we get in the tent and got quiet. The place is a hub of activity. Most of the time it's after you finally get in the tent and get quiet, but they're still there. They just don't really make themselves known until you shut up and get in and get quiet.
Well, maybe you'd stop blasting all that music out there, being ruffians. And they're like, get off my lawn.
Well, Shane and I have talked about it, and I think it's really a simple thing, because, most of the times the rocks they throw, everyone's first inclination is, oh, they just want you out of there. They're trying to scare you out of there. Of course I don't buy that, because it happens every time. It happens all the time. And the rocks are not very large. They just seem to be small to even pebble size. And we know that they are masters of communication non-verbally. So they use non-verbal communications the way we would use a cell phone. I mean, tree knocks, rock clacking, whistles, other animal sounds. So their rock throwing is probably just a form of communication, because they use so many other forms of communication. It has to be, almost, because it very seldom is an aggression thing. So when we get in the tent and we start getting pounded with pebbles and small rocks, it could be something as simple as the fact that they are bipeds, just like us. They're just as curious as us as we are of them, because we look like them. And so they hang around, they come around. What if it's just as simple as they can't understand why we are up during the day and we sleep at night? Because they're up during the night and sleep during the day. So we get in the tent and get quiet, and they start throwing rocks because they just can't. Why aren't we getting up so they can watch us? They don't understand why we're getting in and going to sleep, because they don't sleep at night.
Yeah,
that's an interesting point. Yeah,
no, I like that. Yeah, no, I've actually had a similar question, but I wouldn't have gone that far with it necessarily. But you're right, because we've got accounts of them using fairly large rocks to hunt. Right. In fact, down in San Antonio, a couple of years ago, there was a report where some homeless man was out just sleeping, and he saw this deer, and all of a sudden this rock comes out of nowhere, bashes in the head, and he sees the Bigfoot come, pick it up, and just walk off with it. Scared him half to death. So I've often wondered if they were really trying to get rid of you, wouldn't they go something bigger?
Yeah,
they're
they
not
could.
trying to hurt you.
Yeah, they could clearly crush your tent with a bowling ball sized rock if they wanted to make it clear that they didn't want you there, instead of dinking and dunking these little tiny rocks.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry.
Go on, Jason, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say. So, what? So you've had a face-to-face encounter, correct? Or
yes, sir.
Okay.
I was frozen. He might have been saying, "Can we hear you first? Your encounter, your face to face."
Well, let me grab a picture. I actually drew a picture of the night that I had my encounter. There was two of them. There was a large male and a juvenile. The juvenile was actually my size. So the juvenile was probably 5.5. You know, I'm 5'9", 5'10" on a good day if I got the right size boots on. But I would assume that the juvenile was very close to my size, very thick and robust. You know, I'm a bench presser, and at the time I was bench pressed over 500 pounds. So I was very stout. Now I'm a lot older, and I still like to lift weights, but back then I was extremely strong. So when I tell you that this little one was my size, that's still a good sized little one. And he was tiny compared to the big one that was right beside him. And I drew a picture of the moment where they got behind my truck.
Wow. They're just like solid muscle, the arms.
Yeah. And he had his hands on my ladder racks and was looking over the truck.
Wow.
And I was in the truck at the time watching them. So it was pretty profound. There's a component that we all know. We hardly ever talk about it, but there's a component about Bigfoot sighting survivors that has a very PTSD element to it. And I don't want to disregard any servicemen and women who truly go through PTSD from serving in war and things like that. But there's a component to Bigfoot research, and you recognize people become obsessed with it, and you've got to wonder why. And it's because of it's a PTSD type situation where I know I think about it almost daily. Even when I'm out working, and it happened in 2006. I think about it all the time. I regret not getting out of the truck that night, but I was at the beginning when this happened. I really didn't have near the knowledge that I have now. So the idea of getting out of my truck while that big one was there and the little one, there's no way. Even now I think about it and I'm just like, oh my God, you couldn't have paid me $1 million to open my truck door, because I was that afraid of what this thing was capable of doing, or at least what I thought he was capable of doing. Now I don't think that they do the kind of things that you imagine that they will do, but I do know that hardly a day goes by that I don't regret not getting out with my camera. I had a camera sitting right beside me in the truck. It was one of those Sony cams with the night vision, but I also had a handgun. And I remember sitting there in my truck with all of these thoughts going on in my head while these two creatures were behind my truck, thinking, they're right there. I mean, I can open my truck door and shine a flashlight at him and have my camera going and I can film him, but I need a third hand to hold my gun. There's no way I'm going to do it without the gun. And so I couldn't find any way to do it and be able to have all three of those components, the gun being one of them, and the flashlight being the other, and the camera being the other. I only got two hands. My mind couldn't work in a way to make that feasible. So I just sat there and endured it until they left. But
also, at that moment, your body and your reactions and your brain and your thoughts are not going along at the same time. And so,
well, I talked to a lot of people, and not very many people other than military servicemen, firefighters, and I'm a retired firefighter, and policemen, rangers, things like that. Not very many people have the kind of training that puts you through the kind of stress that you endure during a sighting of a Bigfoot. When you have a sighting, especially a close up, your mind, fear does an amazing, your body does an amazing thing when it assimilates fear and you translate it in a way that you can live with yourself. And it's very traumatic. That's why we have PTSD over a lot of these sightings.
Right.
And everybody is different, but you would think somebody with the training that I've had in the fire service would not let it get to you like that, because I've worked on calming myself down in stressful situations, get my head straight, figure out what to do, and follow these steps. But that's also part of your training. When you're confronted with one of these things, and one of the things that kept popping up in my head over and over again is, oh my God, if these things are killing people, there's nothing you can do about it. There is nothing you could do to stop this thing if he was killing people. And here he was in my campsite. So you've got to try to get beyond those thoughts to try to capture the evidence so you can, show everybody that you could do this. But I just couldn't open the door. And there's no way I could have opened the door. I think I could now. If the exact same thing happened now with the knowledge that I have now, I don't think I would need the gun. I would have the flashlight and the camera, because like I said, if you've talked to Shane, you know that we've approached that juvenile by about 8 foot in that field, and Shane shined a light in its face. We've come in really close to some since then, and it's been an incredible thing. And the 400 has really helped me in that aspect, where I keep trying to relive that night, and this time get out. So I keep beating myself up. Why didn't I do that? Why couldn't I have gotten out and taken a video? And why couldn't I? And so I beat myself up all the time about the what ifs and what could I have done, and proved it to the world and all that stuff. But now at the 400, 10 years later, 12 years later, at the 400, we're able to approach some of these very closely, and they keep coming around. And it actually calms me down, because now I feel like I never thought we'd get to this point, after I would constantly relive that night at the park where I had my encounter. And now I don't have to keep reliving that night, because we're having better nights now at the 400.
How long did your encounter last? How long was it?
From the moment I heard it walking through the park, when I was listening with my parabolic, I'm going to say probably 30 to 45 minutes.
Wow.
It took him a long time. It was going from trash can to trash can. It was lifting up the trash can lids and looking in the trash can and putting the lids back on. And that's what I was hearing first. I was hearing something walking through the leaves, dragging a stick. I could hear the stick dragging behind it. It would drag it through the gravel. I would hear it dragging through the leaves when it would walk from the gravel pathways into the leaves. And then it would hit the metal lantern posts with the stick. I would hear the lantern post go ding as it was walking. So every 15, 20 seconds, you'd hear another ding. So it told me that it was hitting the lantern posts in each campsite. But it was also on his way to each trash can, and I could hear the lids pop off and the lids being put back on, and then the cinder blocks put back on. So at that point, when I'm only listening to it, it has to be a person. It has to be a person. Right. Until I see them, and then it's not a person. But it was one of them doing that, which was checking out the trash can for food.
And was it aware of you in the truck? Was it aware that you were in the truck? Is
that why I was there?
No, was it aware of you in the truck?
No, from what I saw of them, they come in behind the truck, and they were in the wood line, and I was looking in my side mirror and I was watching them. I actually had blankets taped up to my windows so that nothing could see into my truck. And I was just looking at the corner of my truck. I was looking in my side mirror, and I saw them behind my truck, but I had my parabolic mic on. I was listening to them. And when they broke out of the tree line and came rushing up to the back of my truck, the big one started over in a stooped over motion. And as a matter of fact, his hands were probably only about a foot from the ground when his arms were swinging in a very stooped over gorilla like. It looked like a gorilla. And he could have easily went into 4x4 mode. And this is back in 2006. We didn't talk about 4x4 mode and stuff like that, but I'm just telling you what I saw. It looked like he was very close to going with his hands on the ground if he needed to. And they moved exactly. And the little one was right with him, stayed right on his flank. Matter of fact, they were bumping into each other to get to the back corner of my truck, not knowing that when he got to the back corner of my truck, he was still in full view of my side mirror. I was looking at him right there. And that's when he grabbed the racks and stood up straight backbone like you and I would, and was looking over the racks. And that's when I knew how big he was, because I'd been loading ladders up on my ladder racks for years, and it was over the top of my head. So the moment I saw him being taller than my ladder racks, I knew that he was large. And the little one moved in behind the tailgate and ducked down behind the tailgate. But they immediately moved themselves into a position that put the truck between them and the tent. And they had no idea I was in the truck. That was your question. You said, were they aware of me in the truck? While I'm watching this, they positioned themselves to protect themselves from somebody coming out of the tent.
Right.
And that's where I watched them for a little bit, until I thought the big one was coming down the driver's side of my truck. And I really went into panic mode at that moment, and let my blankets close, and I just kind of rolled back into behind my A post and was just kind of sucking my thumb a little bit.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? Go on, Jason. Sorry.
No. I was just gonna. First of all, apparently I had disconnected my computer when I was setting up. It didn't look like it, so I apologize. I'll stop kicking my wires. Apparently, but what did the creature look like? I mean, did it look human? Did it look more ape? What is it that you saw? Well, that's convenient.
He's huge, isn't he, compared to the juvenile? What do you think the relationship was with him and the juvenile, that they're connected?
Of all these years I've had to think about it and mull it over and over and over again in my head, I think it was the little one going through the park looking through the trash can, because it was dragging a stick, making noises. There was nobody else camping except me. There was no camp host. It's the off season. It was in February. It was cold. There was no food in the trash. There's no trash in the trash cans. So, and the behavior of the one walking around dragging that stick, making unnecessary noises, hitting the lantern post, sounds like it was the little one. And when
just being a kid.
Exactly. And when he got to the back of my truck in the tree line, and I saw him look around the tree, he actually put his hands on the tree and looked around the tree. And then I heard him hit the tree with the stick. That was the first time I heard the wood on wood knock. So when I tell people they use sticks, my first encounter involved a stick that was in its possession, and he used it to hit a tree. What happened immediately after that, about 30 yards behind him, was a deep-walled creek called Rock Creek. I heard splashing coming across that creek, and eventually two of them came out of the woods, the little one and the big one, even though at that point I still hadn't put it together in my head that I didn't know which one was the one going through the park. At that point, I thought it could have been the big one. I just know that eventually I see two of them. So it tells me that the tree knock brought the other one across the creek, because all those times it hit the lantern post, nothing came across the creek. But the moment it hit the tree, something came across the creek. It's almost like they had pre-talked about, hey, if you have anything that you need me to come over there, hit a tree. But don't hit the tree unless you need me to come over there, because the thing was definitely hitting all this other stuff and never hit a tree. But the moment he hit a tree, the big one come across the creek and joined him. And I could tell they were both back there for a little bit, because I started hearing a hooting noise that I got onto my recorder. He hooted 17 times in about 2 minutes. Like every 5 seconds, I would hear a Whoo! And it would get louder each time. We've let people listen to it. We've let naturalists listen to it. We've let people put it on spectrograms, and you could see that it was getting louder each time. And by the last one, that's when they came out. So it's almost like they were doing that to see if somebody was in the tent, see if they could wake somebody up or whatever. But they eventually both came out. And so I had to put all this together based on what I eventually saw, which is 2 of them coming out. But I only heard one walking through the park looking in the trash cans. So, the second one joined him, and then they made noises until they felt safe. And then they came out, moved directly to the truck in a position that put the truck between them and the tent. They still thought that somebody was in the tent. That's probably their experiences. Their experiences would tell them that if anything in a campsite at midnight or whatever, if somebody will be coming out of that tent eventually. If there's somebody in that campsite, it didn't even register to them that I would be in the front cab of that truck.
Right. No, well, I mean, most people go, like you said, their experience. They go camping. That's where everyone sleeps. They don't sleep in the car. So I mean, they're just working off of what they've seen. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Did you get a good look at their face, or was it just
the moon? It was a bright moon that night. I don't know if it was a full moon, but it was bright. So it could have been, 7/8 or whatever, but it might have even been a full moon. But the position of the moon was behind it. When it stood there at the corner of my truck, I could see the moonlight coming through the hair on its shoulder. The moon was behind him, and the shoulder looked like a bowling ball, and with the hair going like that, and you could see the moonlight coming through the hair. So unfortunately, that created a backlight, which didn't give me any facial. But I did see his body. I did see his latissimus dorsi when he reached and grabbed the bar, the vertical bar, and then his other hand was on the crossbar in the back. I saw a thumb pointing straight up when it grabbed the bar like that. And he was somewhat lean. Very muscular, not a whole lot of excess weight, but
sort of like me, huh?
But no details.
No details. Did he have like a lot of hair on the head, or was it more like the smoother that we hear so often?
I didn't. Well, of course, I didn't see any kind of a neck. I just saw. Of course, the only hair that I saw that was fluffed up was the shoulder hair, because I actually saw the light coming through it. But everything else was just a configuration of that same type of hair up the sides of the head and brushing down over the shoulder. But then that side shoulder hair was one that had the light coming through it.
Now, you're a powerlifter. You've been doing powerlifting, weightlifting.
Yeah.
When you look at these Sasquatch, their bodies, do you wonder how they manage to, have they got muscles in places that you, even as a powerlifter, can't, would take you a lot to develop?
Well, there's a lot of different powerlifters who are specifically, everybody's body is just a little bit different. Some people have better genetics in certain areas. I was always a great bench presser. I was very thick. When I turn sideways, I'm very thick with not super long arms. So that made me a great bencher. But then I've also been at powerlifting meets where I see unbelievable deadlifters who have these gargantuan backs and long arms for pulling that heavy weight off the floor. And they just keep building it bigger and bigger because they just lift heavier and heavier. And so from the back, their trapezius muscles go all the way up to the sides of their head. And it's just, and that's exactly what a Bigfoot looks like to me. The thickness of their musculature goes up to their head to where it's a crown at their head. The muscles go all the way up the back of their neck, especially in the larger males, to where it crowns at the top. But that's muscle attachment because their arms are so incredibly massive. Like I said, his shoulders look like bowling balls. I can't believe it looked like a half of a bowling ball sitting up there. The kind of stress that is being put on their bones from that kind of musculature means that they need these connections that drapes all the way down their back. Their arms are capable of breaking trees that are 8 and 10 inches, diameter. And and they're built for that. That when we find those signs, I can tell you, I've seen a male that clearly, I'm telling you, he could have turned I felt like he could have turned my truck over if he had a mind to do that. And so that's one of the thoughts going through my head, like, oh my God, he could turn my truck over. And this is a diesel crew cab truck, man. But that's the kind of size I'm talking about. I can't get over it.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible just to even imagine.
Absolutely.
So you've been in the 400. What else are you learning about these creatures? Well, I like how you're managing to kind of make sense of your experience from then, because it was so far back, and there was not a lot of information out there to be able to get into it and learn.
Right. You know, I get invited all the time. I mean, you know, as you would expect, people contact me. I mean, I don't know if it's just from my experience but it worked out with Shane, you know, at the 400, you know, he contacted me for a specific reason, and that is my demeanor. It's very similar to his demeanor. We don't get real excited, not near like I did in my truck that night. Now, you know, I'll go hiking by myself at night. I'll take my thermal camera, but it helps to have a thermal camera because I know nothing can sneak up on me when I can see with my thermal camera. So that makes it easier in my mind to be able to be out in the darkness also. But I also love listening with a parabolic. I'll go out somewhere and I'll just sit down and I'll turn my parabolic, I'll lay it up and I'll turn it on and I'll just sit there in the dark listening, knowing that nothing can get even within 50 yards of me and me not hear it. So technology is really allowing me to be more relaxed in normally stressful situations. I'm not saying that I haven't had stressful situations that has caused me to learn how to relax, but it's really helped at the 400 because there was a couple of times, even when Shane approached that juvenile, that I was kind of losing it, because I was telling him, I was like, because I'm watching the little one on the thermal camera as Shane's walking out there without his light on, trying to direct him to where it was trying to hide in the grass. But I was able to see the juvenile's behavior as he was heading in that direction. And it was clearly nervous. You could tell it kept popping up and looking at him and dropping down like it couldn't figure out what to do. It couldn't believe that here's a human being walking to him in pitch darkness and it's about to be discovered. And I could tell that he was exuding a nervousness that I had not witnessed before. And I was telling Shane, I said, slow down. I said, man, God, please slow down. I said, hunker down to the ground. I said, don't be as scary. Don't look scary. I said, I was trying to give him instructions at the same time, you know, and we had a biologist with us. And I think we were doing it for the biologist because we really wanted the biologist to see what's going on out there. So Shane got within, 6, 7, 8 feet of this thing and shined a light in its face. And it was one of the juveniles. Incredible experience to be able to get to that point after all of this time and the experiences that I've had to be in this location where there's a family of them that seem to be there just about every time we go there. They're not put off with us. We've been going there long enough now where they just, I think they've learned that, you know what, people are sketchy, people can't be trusted, but as far as they can, I think they're learning that we're manageable people. You can manage us and not have to really worry of what we're trying to do out there.
No, I think that's a great point. As they've become familiar with us, that's probably why we don't have as many conflicts. They've adapted to us. They know where we're going, how we interact. And let's face it, it's not like we don't have our heads in these things now. It's like just when everyone's like, well, everyone's got a camera. I'm like, well, yeah, but they got to look up from their phone to use the camera now.
Yeah.
It's like back then it was very conscious that you had a camera. Now you're just distracted by it entirely. No, that's a really interesting story. I mean, it's not very often that you get sort of that you're actually seeing that interplay, right? between the adult and the juvenile. That's not terribly common. I find that very interesting.
We're actually getting what I think is some nice confirmation. Up until this point, we have a lot of conversations. When we're having activity happen, all we can do is experience it, and then we talk to each other. We're like, what do you think that means? What do you think they're doing? And so imagine lots of times being out in a tent, and you're having rocks thrown, and just the conversation that's going on in the tent while rocks are being thrown somewhere from up above us, and we're talking to ourselves, and we're saying, that almost has to be juveniles. And I try to be logical in my thought processes. And the reason, before we even determine that it was juveniles, we say that it's probably juveniles because which one of those family creatures has the kind of time to donate 6 hours out of a nighttime to do nothing but throw rocks at you? And it would be the juveniles, because the adults, they've got certain things that they've got to take care of. They got to procure some food. They got to procreate. They got to do whatever they have to do. They got to scan the perimeters of their property and make sure everything is safe. So there's certain things that an adult just really has to take care of. But a juvenile, on the other hand, they're risk takers. They're undisciplined, and they just seem to have the time. And we were able to confirm that somewhat. At least this one time, we were able to confirm that it was the juveniles that were throwing rocks all night long. If you talk to Shane, you remember that we got hit with rocks all night when we set up our tent in a different location on this property. And the next day, Shane went up the hill where the hill crested into some woods just above us, maybe 50, 60 feet, not too far above us, but we knew that that's where the rocks were coming from. And so the next day, Shane goes up there and he finds all these impressions and back in behind these trees, and it shows that it was the two juveniles, the sibling juveniles. And here's what we did. Shane and I gathered up about 40 little palm-sized rocks, and we took a Sharpie pen and we put marks on them. We went up there and we placed them all in the ground, marked side down, all where those footprints were at. The second night we had rocks thrown again, and the next morning we get up and we find the rocks that had marks on them.
That's a really good idea. I like that.
So it just goes to show you that logically thinking about just things like which ones has the time to do that, and then have it confirmed with something like that.
Yeah. No, that's really great. Daniela?
I think, out of the alphas, the males, the adults, the juveniles are the more, like you say, the more likely to come up close and be more curious. So perhaps, if there was any way you could tame one of these things, I know that's quite a ridiculous thing, but even in a sense of, kind of drawing one in, how on earth would you do it? How would you?
Well, I think Shane has a really good grasp on his techniques. It's been successful a couple of different times in a couple of different locations with a family unit who've eventually shown themselves to him in a way that he's really got it figured out. And I commend him for taking the time and effort to put it together. And that is just going in there every weekend and hiking the exact same trail every time, sitting on the same log every time, taking a 5-minute break, and then getting up and moving along your trajectory and sitting in another spot, the same exact every time. And what that does is that makes them know exactly where you're going, exactly where you're going to sit for a while, and they will create spaces to watch you. And he starts to learn where they're sitting at to watch him in these certain places, and he's starting to catch them. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I've go on, Jason. Sorry.
Oh no, it sounds like that's almost like you're maximizing a form of habituation. They know where you're going to be, so they're going to set up appropriately. Well, now by doing that consistently, you've habituated them. Now it's like, okay, I know they'll be here.
And then he can, and then he can start. Then he can start doing little subtle things like when he knows where they've position themselves when he's sitting on this particular log, which is maybe across the creek behind this brush pile. He'll see them down in this brush pile where they'll come down the hill and wait on him there. And he'll occasionally make eye contact with them. Occasionally, just to let them know, I see you there. I know you're there, and then he'll move on, come back and do it again the next week, and occasionally throw in the looks where he can see them and they can see him. And it's a gradual thing. It's a gradual thing where they become so comfortable that they're like, he knows we're here. He's waiting for us to get here. And you see him looking at us, but he's acting like it's no big deal.
Danielle, there's actually a really interesting question that Chris Coleman posted just a second ago. I'd like to ask Randy. It's actually, it's really insightful. There we are. Yeah, with these creatures so elusive, why do they approach campsites knowing they could be spotted? If they have an abundance of natural food, why go for a non-natural source?
I can answer that. I believe Chris is probably, if he's referring to what happened to me in 2006, where it was going through the trash cans at that particular campground. If that's the case, there was a gentleman there who lived in Sulphur, Oklahoma, and this was in Rock Creek, just south in the Chickasaw National Park. There was a gentleman named Charles Hallmark, Dr. Charles Hallmark, who had sightings in that park system. And I didn't know until later when I spoke to him on the phone for the first time, because I wanted to talk to somebody else who had experiences in that park. He told me that he had been baiting them in those trash cans in the off season. So I was able to have my sighting based on the fact that in the off season, he was going in there and placing baits in those trash cans just specifically for those creatures. And they were there still looking for them when I was there and was able to have my sighting. So I'm not saying that they necessarily would risk going into looking in trash cans specifically, but Charles Hallmark had set that park up to in the off season to be a Bigfoot baiting system that I fell into without even knowing that he had set it up.
Yeah, things like that. It's interesting when that happens because there's so many people doing different things, and every once in a while we kind of stumble across it. So, is it possible that again, the reason for this is not that there is a lack of natural food, but food that's naturally occurring, you've got to procure it. You got to go find it. You got to hunt it down. And they're just looking for an easy meal like pretty much every other animal in the world would do. It's like, well, hey, why go run down some squirrel when I can just go over here to this trash can and eat something that's probably going to taste a lot better than that squirrel?
Yeah. And also to answer Chris's question, it's easy to think about these things as being an animal. That has been the hardest thing for me to do my 180 on. They are not, they don't exhibit anything that makes me now believe that they are an animal. They just are not an animal. I don't know if they are a primitive people. I don't know if they are a primitive tribe. I don't know any of that. I can only speculate, but I do have the behaviors that I've seen, that I've witnessed, that I can hear, that tells me that they are intelligent. They are smart. They don't move like an animal moves. I've got them twice on thermal camera when they think I'm looking at it, but I'm watching them with my thermal camera and filming where here's some bushes and it's looking at me like this and it's frozen, but he's not frozen. He was dropping.
Oh, wow.
It took him 3 minutes to go from here to out of sight because he was dropping so slow that you couldn't even see any movement.
Huh.
That is an incredibly intuitive behavior that is human-like. And if they did that during the day, you'd never see them. In the daylight, on a hillside, if they moved like that, you'd never see them. So it was doing it at night because I was facing it, and it thought I was looking at it. It didn't know that I had technology on my side, which was a thermal camera. But if that's the same behavior they use during the day, that's why you don't see them. They don't move in a way where you'll catch movement.
Right. Huh. That's interesting. I like that.
What's the ultimate goal for you then?
I've got a little bit of an OCD issue. Once I get strapped in on something, I mean, I'm going to ride this pony until I find out what's going on. I mean, that's just the way it is, or until I pass away. And more than likely, I'll probably pass away. But I've been so fortunate and I enjoy it. I mean, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I've never, I don't go to the bars, I don't do anything. This is my only vice, and I spend enough money to erase any other vices that are out there. I spend that much money on this stuff, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the people. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy. It's not just a brotherhood, but you can actually see the relief on people's faces when they want to talk. People want to talk to you. They want to talk to somebody, because where do you go for answers? Where do you go for answers when you see one of these things, especially if you see one up close? You can't get answers anywhere. As a matter of fact, you get a lot of ridicule, and it gets old. So it's just easier to pull myself back into just everybody that's Bigfoot into Bigfoot, because then we can just go ahead and just cut to the discussions and have our discussions and try to figure these things out. And I enjoy it.
Good.
No, going back to what you were mentioning earlier about PTSD maybe being a large aspect of this, I think you're absolutely right. We come, a lot of us are, we've had these weird encounters with these things that we're told can't exist, don't exist, and you're right. You see those, you see something that you can't, that you're told is not right. There's that bonding. It's like, hold on, this is someone who understands what I've been through, and I'm not crazy. I mean, maybe I am, but that's not. But what I saw was legitimate, right? I think that's a great point that you're making there. It's very easy often for us to just forget how traumatic a lot of these encounters can be, even if nothing happens. Right? That person's had a life-altering event, and the problem is, if you go to talk to somebody about it, now you're being ridiculed. Now you're the crazy guy. So either you put yourself through that, which is traumatic in and of itself, or you hold it in, which is also traumatic. So
yeah, I mean, Jason, you're correct. I mean, if you took a group of people who all had encounters, and you ask them, what has happened in your life since your encounter, you will find out that there will be nothing in anyone's life that has even come close to altering your view of the world and what you thought of from that moment forward than that meeting, that encounter right there.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Have we got any questions? I'm just going to see if we've got any questions in the chat. What do you feel about, you say you like to go out and listen. What about the language they use, apart from the clicks and the noise?
To be honest, other than just a short mumble every now and again on one of the recordings that I was able to obtain, I just haven't heard, especially the Sierra sounds, haven't heard anything like that. Haven't heard the gibberish. I've heard a lot of people mention it and say they heard sound like two Chinese dudes arguing in their driveway one night, and then he came out and fired his shotgun off his porch because he said it sounded like two Chinese women were fighting in his driveway or something. And this was in the Kiamichis. So I hear stories like that. And so clearly they do have the ability to articulate in a language if they choose to, but they are such experts at nonverbal that they seldom need to. They can just do a couple of tree knocks and a good rock clack, and whoever they're talking to knows exactly what they want or expect, so that they don't have to do too much talking.
How do you feel about people who experience things like mind speak and
I'm not saying it's not possible. I just don't. I can tell you I've been extremely close to these things multiple times and had all kinds of things happening in the physical realm that had evidence of rock throwing, of vocals, of things, of foot tracks that were left, and all those type of things. I have never once had anything outside of my own fear direct my body to do anything like the night in my truck. I'm telling you, and being a trained firefighter, and still experience the kind of fear that I felt that night, I can tell you unequivocally that when somebody tells me that fear is not capable of completely altering what you take in and how you interpret it to however is comfortable for you, then you're mistaken. Because plus there's a lot of people on maintenance medications. Almost everybody's on maintenance medications these days. I mean, heart medication, blood thinners, antidepressants, and then couple that with, smoking a little hooch or drinking some alcohol. There's a lot of people who don't think that those type of things is going to alter their brain waves, but they do.
Yeah.
So you're saying we shouldn't be smoking crack cocaine while drinking and
or shooting heroin. I don't know.
While Bigfooting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually took some people. I promise you, I took some people up to the ridge in Oklahoma with me, and they came down from Iowa. Supposed to be these big Bigfoot researchers. And as soon as we got to camp, they were like, the daughter was having to go to their vehicle and get a beer out of an ice chest for the guy. And she just kept going back and forth until they were gone. He drank probably 12 beers while we were sitting up there talking. And they were talking about Bigfoot's coming up and taking her husband's beers off their back porch. And then, they broke out the weed and were smoking. And I'm just like, I don't know, people are hard for me to understand that you can think that you can mix a lot of those type of things with research and think that one is not going to affect the other.
It does. Yeah. It does tend to damage credibility, and particularly when you that is sort of the question, though, right? It's the more spectacular the argument or the claim, you kind of need spectacular evidence, and it tarnishes the spectacularness, if I can use that word, if that's a word. I'm owning that word. The spectacularness of the claim if the person is also arguing with Super Mario because that's what he's seeing, stealing his beer. Yeah, I get it. But at the same time, like you said, there's plenty of people who don't have that particular problem who are making these claims. But like you said, we don't know anything really. And something I mentioned yesterday, I've really come to the point where I'm starting to wonder if we're always if everyone who's having an actual Bigfoot encounter, so let's work from the fact that there's an encounter happening, how much of it's actually Bigfoot? Or maybe we're clumping too many phenomena in together, right? And what we actually have are 2 or 3 or more different things sort of happening. The reason we're trying to put these things together is like, well, why doesn't this all fit? It's like, well, because this belongs to this creature, this belongs to this creature, and this belongs to this creature. But we're all clumping them together, maybe. And that's kind of obfuscating and muddying the water because we're trying to make it all fit.
No doubt. And people are that way. They're, I see people all the time, even taking mundane evidence that could easily be sway in any direction. And it becomes so heartfelt Bigfoot evidence, that they have no idea that sincerity does not make it true, because nobody's going to be any more sincere than some of these people that are presenting these blob squatch pictures and this wood pile that you blow up and that face that you're finally able to extricate out of there as a Bigfoot hiding there when it's really just a piece of wood.
Right.
But they're sincere. And for some reason they think sincerity begets truth, but that's not the case.
No.
Well, most people do, though, right? I mean, that's what we hear all the time. It doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot or whatever. It's look at how sincere they are, and they're clearly passionate about it. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean that cross stitch really is the most exciting thing in the world. I'm sorry to tell your grandmother, but I get it, right? There's how much that goes back, maybe the sincerity to that, to that PTSD that you were talking about, right? It's that search for external validation, right? It's you've had this encounter and you need to, and there's that sort of trying to get, that external validation, this is right, that the universe is different from what you're told. Because those of us who've had these encounters, we're living in a world where, like, everyone, you look at the mainstream, you're like, hey, this doesn't jive. And so
Right.
there's that discordance. And so it's almost like we feel the need to reinforce the fact that our encounter is supported, so that our view of the universe, even though it's changed, we may not know what it is. We know it's not this, and it's just that continual look for the validation.
Well, I'm going to give you an example, and I've given one example already, and that is of the recording of a tree knock where the stick breaks. Mm-hmm. I also have my first encounter where I clearly heard a stick being dragged through as it was walking, it was dragging a stick. So there's two separate times where there was an actual stick or a club involved with a Bigfoot that had it handy and used it to communicate. So a lot of people, they speculate about tree knocks. So I've heard them say, you know what? When I did a tree knock and then I got an answer tree knock, there's no way it could have found a stick or picked one up that fast and gave me. So, I mean, it did it immediately. So it must be a mouth pop or a chest hit or something. So they're starting to cross the gap with whatever they can think of, rather than just wait for the evidence. And I've just waited and I try not to speculate at all. But then all of a sudden I get what I perceive as being good, solid evidence that it actually is a stick. So for me, that validates that you don't have to jump these gaps and fill it in with whatever.
Right.
Just keep trying and let's just fill it in with real evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how many more pictures of those blob splotches can we look at? Where is it taking us? It's just a waste of time. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It means something to that person. But in terms of, trying to get something solid here, and actually, this is, how far are we going on this journey? How far, unless we get that body, what have we got between now and getting a body? There's so much we can play with and do, but, practically, that's the next stage, isn't it? I mean, how long are we going to, how much time have we got? I mean, we've got as much time as we want, haven't we, obviously, but, one day we've got to really move forward from this, because, I've
got some pretty good game cam pictures. I mean, there was a phase where I was using game cams just like everybody else. I mean, I was back, 12 years ago when Cuddy back had these $500 cameras, and I had like 6 of them. I mean, ridiculous amount of money that I've spent on things. And I got one of those expandable ladders. So over time, I was on this private 200 acres in Oklahoma of a gentleman who invited me there to do some research, because he sold hunting leases, and several hunters had seen things every year. So I was there. Right. And so I would work those game cams up higher and higher over time till I had them 20 feet up in a tree, thinking at some point you'll get above their sight line and be able to catch something. Never did. So game cams are generally ineffective for whatever reason. For whatever reason, they're detecting them somehow, whether it's echolocation, who knows? But at least evidence is telling us they're not very good as far as evidence is concerned. And there's a lot of effort you put into them for not much return. But I have gotten lucky with I've got some good game cam pictures. I've got that head that came up in the same campsite where I had my encounter 4 months later. I mean, I was going there every weekend after that. And 4 months later, I had a game cam hidden on one of the tables, and something came up, and I got its face looking right at the camera, and it's round. You don't see any ears. The ears are on the side of the head, but it's washed out because the camera takes black and white pictures at night, and it was so close that it was just washed out white, but it's a head. And then the next picture, it stood up, and you see its armpit, shoulder and armpit. I think it was the little one. But the thing is, the game cam was hidden on a table amongst other supplies all piled up on the tables, so it didn't look like a game cam on the side of a tree. It was just amongst.
Yes. No, that's exactly what I want to do. My thought is the biggest mistake that we're making, for at least for digital or photography, is we're going into their world. What we need to do is find those places where they're coming into ours and set up something so they're already anticipating there being a thing. Maybe even, again, I don't know anything about anything, right? None of us do. But I think even finding something where there's already an EM field that's there, right? Like, again, my personal thought, and if anyone knows a good place to do this, please feel free to do it. You don't need my permission. But it's setting up just not even a game cam, but setting up like wherever there's like a gas station that serves food and throws away food, right? Just have a camera trained on that on that trash can 24/7. Just keep going back and reviewing the film, because at some point, if it's up against a creek or a river, there's some they're going to come and get that.
Well,
food.
that's what I was going to lead into with what I was saying. Out at the 400, we haven't used any game cams yet. I've got 3 game cams that I want to use, but we're waiting for the right opportunity. We don't want to present them out there and all of a sudden have them be like, "What? Why? Why? We didn't think these guys were like that," or whatever. If that's their thought process, I don't know. I just don't want to take any chances, but we do have some spots out there where we know these things are going up and down into the creek, because Shane has found that where they're going up there, and it involves a place where we can hide these cameras on the ground, where they're walking up these rock steps where 2 hills converge, and it's washed out going down into the creek, and it's like big rock steps that they're coming down into the creek. Just across from so up under those shelves, we're going to put these game cams and stack rocks up and under there so that it's actually amongst the rocks. It's not going to be up on a tree. It's actually going to be within the shelf system that we think they're going up and down. And when we go out there in July for 5 days, we're going to set those 3 game cams up in those rocks. And we think using the natural rocks that are already there, that it shouldn't give them anything to pay attention to that's out of the norm. We're not adding anything to the environment. We're not taking anything away. We're just it's going to be within what's already there. And you don't really get that opportunity very much to where they're coming up and down to be able to place the camera there in a way where it's not going to be visible to them.
Do you think you can get away with doing that? Do you think they're too aware of their surroundings?
Well, I do know. I don't know. I did put a recorder up there, and we've got a recorder of something walking directly up to the recorder, moving the rocks and tapping on the recorder. So I don't know.
Well, that may actually. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was just saying, I know Shane and Chris were burying food, weren't they? And putting rocks on top. And they were taking them off and taking the food. They knew, don't they? They know. Sorry. Jason, while I shut my dog up.
No, you're fine. No, that actually may be, but to your advantage, though, right? If they're like, hey, why are these rocks stacked here? And they go over to find that, to investigate the rocks. And I was like, oh, hey, there's a camera. And I'm smacking my own microphone. I apologize. Maybe that works to your advantage, because now you get a better photo. I would love to actually see your photo of the face in the armpit, because that's hot.
Well, I don't know how I can put it on here, but yeah, if you friend me on Facebook, I'll send them to you.
All right. Well, that sounds like a plan. Where just for those who maybe are new to you, where is a good place to find Into the 400? Your information and then what y'all are doing.
It's on Amazon Prime, and it's the first right now. It's the first of 3, and we've got the second one's being worked on now. And I'm telling you, the evidence that we have now, I mean, it's not spectacular in the first one, because the first one you got to get to know who we are and where we're at. But we do have a thermal image, a thermal video of one in a field popping his head up and looking at us and ducking back down. We've got that on the first documentary. But the second and the third documentary involves us approaching that juvenile in the field. And we've got one belly crawling. It dropped to the ground, and you see it belly crawling to his right, using his arms to reach out and pull himself over.
Oh, wow.
In a thermal video of that. So we've got some really good stuff that I'm excited about. Some of the best stuff that gotten over the years. So that's coming out, one after the other. And we're still going out there hoping to keep getting better and better stuff. And we're going to try to get some game cam pictures in there too. Eventually hoping to approach one physically and have it accept being approached in a way that can be documented somehow.
Right.
But anyways, so yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. And I think it's like a $2.99 rental. Come on, it's like for a pack of cigarettes. Same price as a pack of cigarettes. Come on, people.
Last time I checked, cigarettes like $10 a pack. Yeah. When was the last time you bought cigarettes?
Right. Yeah. Never. I don't know what cigarettes cost, but.
And you can go over to Ozark Mountain Sasquatch channel on YouTube. Shane's got
that's my buddy Shane. Buddy Shane, he's the one that spearheaded this whole thing, and I was fortunate enough to just be somebody that he reached out to and invited me along for the ride, and it's been a spectacular ride. So I can't thank him enough. I hope I'm doing it justice, with what I bring to the table, and it's a nice brotherhood. Chris Reinhardt, he's been doing some good stuff up in Connecticut. He's got some good corroborating evidence up there that's matching what's happening on the 400. Unfortunately, he's so far away that he has to do what he has to do up there and then come down for visits at the 400. But three good guys. We're like the Three Musketeers out there, man. And then we got Dan Nadrello out of Michigan, Michigan, I believe. And he's the biologist that we invited a couple years ago because we wanted somebody with some credentials to come in there and validate, what's going on. And it couldn't have worked out better so far. So fingers crossed that, we keep producing.
Yeah. They're all nice guys. They've been on here. Shane's been on here quite a few times. I enjoy talking to Shane. I like to know the progression because he's always moving forwards with it, and learning stuff all the time. So you don't have your own channel, you do, but it's a bodybuilding, weightlifting channel because people are asking. Jason will want that, definitely. Jason, you've got your own channel as well. Not another Bible study. Yeah,
actually I do. So outside of, every Monday I'm hanging out with Tex on the Trinity Paracryptid Network, right? And on Texas Porch. And when I'm not hanging out with you, you can find me at Not Another Bible Study. It's a Bible study, usually. But yeah, we're doing things a little differently. We're going to explore things in a way most people probably haven't heard or seen before. So, we have a lot of fun.
I've just put a link up to that channel in the description for you. Nobody knows Daniela Randy has a picture he wants to show. Are you going to send that picture, Randy?
I don't know how to do that. Okay,
all right. We'll work it out.
I only know how to send it through Messenger. If anybody wants to friend me on Facebook and tell me who you are, I'll friend you. And hey, Jason, I also have some audio that's going to knock your socks off.
Oh,
I've got
socks. So I'm already halfway there.
I've got those hoots from the two Bigfoots that came up behind my truck. I've got that recording of them hooting.
Have you got them now? Have you got them now handy to send?
I don't know how to do all that. I only know how to send things over Messenger.
Well, messenger me, and I'll play them.
But anyways, Jason, I also have a bluff charge where a Bigfoot was tearing branches off of a tree and pacing back and forth until he built up his nerve and then ran towards my truck. And you can hear his feet hitting the ground as he runs past my truck and then stomps back off into the woods. I've got that recorded. You will love it.
Oh, wow.
Right. Absolutely. We should have got all that for tonight. We'll have to have you back on, Randy.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me send these things to Jason. Let me send these things to Jason when he friends me. I want him to hear these. I want him to see my pictures. And if you want to do another show specifically about all of these different things and when they happen, and you want to be able to let people hear them, I'm game for that.
We'll do that. We'll do that on my channel on Hidden Existence. We'll go into a bit more detail, and we'll go into it a bit more then. I must tell everyone to go over and go and check out the Shudder. If you want to hear those stories that Kerry's been putting on there, there's a link in the description. And check out Hidden Existence again, because it's good. And it's we've got some good guests. And on Saturday, the researchers report on my channel, the guest is called Bev, and she lives in a haunted house. So we're going to hear about all the stuff that's going on with her. There's a lot of stuff going on. Very interesting. Thanks for coming on, Randy. We'll
Sounds like
definitely
fun.
do it again. Yeah, it is a lot of fun. Having a bit of poltergeist activity, and there's so much going on. It's going to be pretty fascinating. So thanks again, Randy. We'll do it again, definitely. Go and check out Into the 400 on Amazon Prime, $2.99. It's cheaper than a packet of fags, apparently. And I'm sorry, we call them that's what we call them over here in England. I should have said cigarettes. There's no offense intended. I better shut up now before I dig a deeper hole. Good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
See you all soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.